Good evening. Calling to order the Monday zoning subcommittee meeting for Monday, July 12th, 2022. We'll all rise and salute the flag. July 11th. Apologies.
Roll call of the zoning subcommittee members. Councilor McKenna? Here. Councilor Novoselsky? Here. Councilor Sereno?
Here.
Here. Council President Visconti? Absent. And Chairman Keefe?
Here.
Here. Quorum is present. First item on this evening's agenda is an ordinance amending the zoning ordinances of the City of Revere legalizing accessory dwelling units.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So I think everyone was at the last zoning subcommittee, or special hearing for these two housing amendments or ordinances. There wasn't a lot of talk from the council members, so I just wanted to really ask for this first piece, the accessory dwelling units, if any of the council members had anything that they were curious about or if they had any issues with it. Thank you. Councilor Sereno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering, through you, is there anybody from the administration who can speak on this to questions?
I believe Frank Stringy is here, and he is very good at answering those questions. Mr. Stringy, were you raising your hand? Come on up, if you would. Any other councilors? The ordinance is pretty straightforward. I know that I do have one exclusion I was going to request, but I know that I think it's pretty straightforward, and as I mentioned, I think this is something that's absolutely necessary to help legitimize some of the homes in the city. So, your questions, Mr. Sereno?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Stringy. I had a call from a gentleman who, if you could just clarify, because obviously we're talking about single-family homes, and I think, you know, most of us, the understanding is that these are the single-family homes in the city with in-law, quote, in-law apartments that we're looking to turn into just legal dwelling places. The gentleman that I spoke with was concerned. He thought that we were trying to shoehorn apartments in single-family homes and essentially get rid of single-family homes as we know it here in the city. But the way I understood it, it's the generally accepted in-law apartments that we're working to legalize and bring up to code. Is that correct?
That's partially correct. This does afford the ability of single-family homeowners to create an ADU within their existing dwelling unit. I mean, single-family home. So they can't, there are a lot of restrictions attached to that. They can't add on to the house. If you've read the ordinance, there's a number of restrictions regarding parking and so forth and home ownership. But if you have the ability, and a lot of people do, to build a small ADU no more than 600 square feet within the single-family district, the RA1, RA district, and one bedroom, that more or less meets the demands of maybe an older family member or a young family member or even an additional income rental unit. So there are instances where that you can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I might, I'm sorry, I have
Okay,
two
sure.
more. Well, one question and one sort of request. So my other question would be, has there been any talk, you know, we've heard horror stories as counselors. We know people who went to sell their homes in the city who had the in-law units as they are so described, and, you know, they were forced to tear out, you know, bathrooms or kitchens or whatnot. I understand this ordinance is probably just moving forward, correct? We're not looking to mitigate or address any former residents who, you know, were forced to take that hit, are we?
No, I mean, that's part of the catalyst for this because the Inspectional Service Department was having a lot of kitchens removed upon sale of properties that were illegal. This affords the homeowner, you know, to legalize those and kind of gives them a break. You know, it's not easy to go in there and ripping out kitchens and that, but which they've had for years. So this gives them the ability to maintain those as legal units if they meet the ADU ordinance requirements.
And one final request, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Would someone in ISD be willing to, really walk family members through what would be needed to bring an accessory dwelling unit up to code, the in-law apartments? Because I know that, from experience, people will go down to ISD, they'll essentially give them a checklist, but it doesn't necessarily, reflect their specific case. So would ISD be willing to have somebody, if a family is looking to legalize an accessory unit dwelling, to walk them through those steps?
Yeah, I think that's necessary because it's a case-by-case situation. You just can't have one broad spectrum of general requirements that meet everybody's needs. I mean, it has to be case by case. I mean, there's some people that don't have that second means of egress, and, it'd be good for the building department to sit down with them, show them, what the requirements are, even regarding plumbing and electrical and fire protection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council Serino. Council Rizzo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm completely in favor of this. It's, in my opinion, it's probably 15 years overdue. I mean, I wish we had done this years ago. It would have probably saved people from having to either get a variance or worse, much worse, having to rip out kitchens and other associated items with these in-law apartments that, when the homes were built, were allowed. I mean, these homes all got occupancy permits. Many people have paid taxes on two families, yet when they go to sell them, they can't sell them. And this has been going on for a long, long time. If anything, and I don't know if, nothing's been passed, the only thing, and I think I might have had this conversation with you, Frank, through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't know why it's within a half a mile, there's no additional parking requirement, but anything over half a mile, they need one additional space. I mean, I just see it so that, it would be the same across the board. And, if it's already being used, which I believe is probably going to be the predominant amount of people who are going to apply for these accessory dwelling units. I believe that. I don't know that people are going to go racing out trying to build accessory dwelling units. I just don't think so. I don't know, but I really don't think so. I think people that have used these in-law apartments for a long, long time will just want to try to legitimize them. So I don't know why we'd want to put additional parking requirements on people on one side of the city over the other. That's my only comment, Mr. Chairman. If we can consider that, or if the members of the council want to consider that, I would be certainly amenable to that. But if not, I plan on voting in favor.
Thank you, Councilor
Thank you.
Rizzo. I was going to say the one item that I was going to ask to have stricken would be the Section 1 on 17-25. So the parking requirements would be the same throughout. And the reason being is, similar to what you're saying, but everyone should have, I think, the same requirement. But also, there's a significant amount of over-congestion in the city, and we've found that waiving parking requirements is often come back to bite us. So that would be my request, to keep it the same and have the space. People aren't getting, there's no less cars on the road, and there's no one in this world that can convince me otherwise. Thank you.
So, Mr. President, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, so can you so are we thinking the same? Do you want to see that? Or you want to see the additional space?
For all, so the half mile within the train would not be included. So if you're required to have the space in an area a half mile further from the train, then you should have the same requirement if you're as close to the train.
Okay.
In just this case, and again, I think that for the most part, I have reviewed a number of these potential conversions. A lot of them fall within that guideline. They're also allowing them to be tandem, so that does give them a little bit of an easement where they could be tandem, where they don't have to all be side by side. But again, this still does leave room for eventual zoning board of appeals and other potential outs if someone wasn't a hardship.
I'm totally in agreement with that. Parking obviously is an issue. I just didn't see why one side of the city would get preference over the other side, that's all. Okay, thank you.
Council Morbido.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Frank Stringy, I just recently got the email that you submitted for additional language regarding penalties. Does that apply to owner-occupied?
I'll have to defer that to the Special Services Department. That amendment came from that department in their legal counsel, so I believe it affects owner-occupied. If there is a violation of that ADU and it is still owner-occupied, those fines would still be valid.
Because to me, I think it's a little hefty. $300 per day per violation. So if you have 3 violations per day, that's $900 per day times 30 days in a month. It's a little hefty. Just 30 days a month, that's $90,000 a year in fines if someone doesn't pay. If you can help me understand that.
There
So
you go.
I can clarify, Louis Cavallaro, Building Commissioner. That's just the legal language, that's the max that we can go up to, but we usually will never go that high.
Okay.
And I can attest that when these limits are in place, very often, as soon as an owner or a resident responds to the letter and/or goes down to ISD and says, hey, I'm correcting the issue, the meter stops. And they're very good at being reactive to that. I've seen it firsthand, so they're not going to.
Point of information, would it go through the 40U system?
When it hits the 40U, that's because they've ignored it for a very long period of time.
Do you know what the time frame is?
30 days?
Usually
It's-
around like 6
yeah.
months.
Yeah, that to me, I have very little, I have no concern over people that don't want to respond to correcting their problems. Very little leniency.
And just to address the parking, we thought that within the train station, that we just want to relieve the parking requirements, because that's what, basically the main issue with converting to a 2-family is the parking. That's the hardest part. That's why we send them to get a variance.
I could be on an island there, and I'd be okay if my fellow councils don't agree, and we can move forward. Any other councilors? Councilor Visconti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in favor of this, obviously, for multiple reasons. Like my fellow colleague said, it's, I believe, probably long, well overdue. And I think it's needed in the city, and it may help assist with the housing situation as well. So with that being said, the question I have, in terms of code-wise, I know they have to abide by all the codes. Are you requiring them to also hardwire the smokes and stuff like that as well? Is that included? Because I know some of the concerns are when I've been dealing with residents that have had some issues, the hardwiring and the additional costs that are involved in making it a legal 2-family, I was hoping would soften a little bit with the accessory unit. Now, not saying that it doesn't have to meet code. Obviously, we want it to meet code, but, you know, softening the blow for our residents is the major concern. And that being said, I was looking, if there's an ability to make it a legal 2-family and incur the same, or make it a legal accessory unit as well as making it a legal 2-family, you know, and the costs are the same, I wonder how effective that might be.
So
Thank you,
this
Mr.
ordinance just gives them the chance to add another unit and keep what's there, what they already have there. They would still have to hardwire the smokes and add 2 ways out and legalize the kitchen that there was no permits for. They have to make sure the water line, the sewer line's up to code. So it won't relieve them of everything. It's not just gonna grandfather what's there. They still have to pull permits to bring everything up to code an electrical panel, a sub panel have to be added in that area too.
So a sub-panel for that particular unit would have to be added?
Yes.
So I want to make that quite clear to, the residents out there, because, I don't want them to all of a sudden think that I
Yes.
have an in-law apartment and all of a sudden, I'm grandfathered in. So thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and thank you for the clarification. I wasn't quite sure, because I know the two-family is requiring hardwiring, but I assumed with it being not technically a two-family, being a one with an accessory unit, that might soften, but I can understand it. There's a fine line to be drawn when it comes to changing the safety requirements,
It's building
especially
code.
since the use is very similar. I can agree. Gotcha. And I spoke with Councilor Rizzo, and I think that we'll I'm now amicable to leaving the parking as written in this code, since you've convinced me otherwise. Any other questions on the accessory dwelling ordinance? Should we move to vote?
Chairman, does the committee want to take up the amendments?
The amendment would be the change of language by Mr. Stringy offered?
Correct, there was 3 different changes. Do you want me to read them?
Yep,
Okay.
please.
So into the record, First Amendment as proposed by the Planning Board under Section 1725010 on line 5, add the word "single-family" before the word "structure." Section 1725040 shall be amended to include the language, "Owner shall provide permission to the City Municipal Inspections Department and Fire Department to inspect the property annually and agrees to provide full and voluntary access to the residents on a 48 hours notice from the city." And a brand-new section 1725050 called enforcement and penalties.
Can,
Please. Roll call on the amendments.
Roll call on the amendments. Councilor McKenna?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Novoselsky? Yes. Councilor Sereno?
Yes.
Yes. Council President Visconti?
yes.
Yes. And Chairman Keefe?
Yes.
Yes, the amendments were all approved.
Thank you.
On the accessory dwelling unit ordinance as amended, Councilor McKenna?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Novoselsky? Yes. Councilor Sereno?
Yes.
Yes. Council President Visconti?
Yes.
Yes. And Chairman Keefe?
Yes.
Yes, the ordinance as amended has received a favorable recommendation from the zoning subcommittee. Next item on tonight's agenda is an ordinance amending the zoning ordinances of the City of Revere, establishing inclusionary zoning.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And again, there was no discussion from the council really at the public hearing last week. We did have a number of residents that had come up and spoke both in favor and opposed, and there were a number of letters that were read into the record. So at this point, being the subcommittee, I would like to open it up to the council to ask questions, to have good dialogue, and if there are new items that could be brought in front that, answering some of these questions. I know that we had some people from MAPIC, and I know we had Ruben from the city that was willing to answer some of these questions for us. Be happy to have you up at the podium if you'd like. But I guess I'll open it up to the council. Any questions on this ordinance? I submitted a number of questions. I'd like to, if anyone wants to go in front. Councilor Rizzo?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First off, I don't have any questions. I watched the presentation, read through the ordinance, and just, I guess, in the interest of full disclosure, I am completely against it for several reasons. Truly, if this accessory dwelling unit ordinance had passed a long time ago, there wouldn't be a need for this, because typically those rents are much less than what we're seeing in a lot of these larger scale development. But this is just, once again, promoting more development. We were told last week, and this is just, it's really aside from actually what's being talked about, But we were told that the median income for Boston was 120,000 versus Revere, which was about half of that. And the median income for Boston is 76,000, Revere is 68,000. Very easy to find that out. It was also said that most developments are granted variances for reduced parking. And again, we were talking about parking earlier, Mr. Chairman. Who's in favor of this? Who favors reduced parking? I mean, who's benefiting from that? Certainly not the residents that I talk to around the city. You know, in exchange for the benefit of 12% of affordable units, we're allowing developers to do many things. One is to reduce their lot size requirements by 50%, setbacks by 25%, increasing the floor area ratio by 25%, offer no off-street parking within a half a mile of the T-station again, no parking. And worse, in less dense parts of the city, I guess that would be over a half a mile, there's a half a space per unit that they would, I mean, so now we're going to take neighborhoods, the ones that are surviving right now and not having parking issues right now, and we're going to start to create some, because we haven't done enough of that. I could not be any more against this than I am. I plan on voting against it. There's a 70%, I mean, this is just something else, a 70% Revere preference, which means there's the 30% non-Revere preference for people, or a 30% people. So it's just a matter of building more, building more, building more, giving more breaks so that 12% of the units can become affordable. I can see it coming. They'll be combining lots. They'll be buying homes, combining lots, putting the 12% affordable, getting all of these restrictions, getting the increased floor area ratio, getting the parking benefit, getting the lot size benefit. It's outrageous to me, and I'm only one vote. I plan on voting against it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Sereno, and then
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following my colleague to my right is a tough act to follow, but I'm kind of in line with his thinking. My biggest concerns and what I've been hearing from residents are parking and the lot size reduction, the 50% lot size reduction, and the setbacks. And just like he said, you're already seeing it in the city that people are buying homes, one-family homes, another lot next door, or even just, the one-family home, knocking it down, building bigger, higher. I just don't think this is what we need right now in Revere. Thank you.
thank you. Council President Visconti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleague has really pointed out the obvious and really the negative impacts that this is going to have in our community. Those negative impacts outweigh the positives in what I believe. So, Councilor Rizzo, you pointed out every item that I was going to talk about, obviously, because those are the concerns of our residents that actually live in our communities now. And to do this to know that it's not going to be 100% Revere residents, and the 30%, we're doing this for people that are coming outside of the city. I'm sorry, I am completely against it, and don't feel comfortable voting on something that will have such a negative impact on our community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Before it, Councilor Novoselsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I've been looking at this in so many different ways. I don't mind affordable housing in general. I don't like the details. I don't like the 6 units. I think it will hurt the city as a whole. If we were going to do it, I'd change some of the numbers, maybe up to 20 units, and reduce the percentages that are coming in. But I think we're just making everything too dense, and I'd like to keep the city the way it is and still provide some kind of affordable housing for it. What the answer is, I don't know. But in this case, I have a problem the way it's written. But in general, do we want affordable housing? We just passed Affordable Housing Trust Fund, for people to use funds towards it. But with the way these numbers are put together, I have a problem with the numbers themselves. So, thank you.
Thank you. Council McKenna?
Thank you. I'm not for this either. I hate to say that, but, Beachmont's getting a lot of development, and it's very dense already. They're looking at 2 parcels across the street from Beachmont School. They're looking at Lee's Trailer Park. They're looking at Suffolk Downs. It's dense already. Parking is atrocious. I just think it's going to add to it. So I'm just really not in favor of this. If it was written differently, I might be, but it's not. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Mr. Cantor, how are you, sir? I did have some questions. Oh, Council Morabito? You took 3 minutes. Put your hand up next time. I'll get you early. Thank you.
So, being that this is a subcommittee, I think we all agree we need more affordable housing, right? So maybe we should keep this in committee and everyone can submit any kind of amendments that they choose, that they deem is necessary.
That's a good recommendation, but I'd like to get some, there is a lot of dialogue that I'd still like to have. Mr. Cantor? Sure. I know that you brought Mrs. Smith up here, and I submitted a number of questions.
Do you want to start there?
I was curious if we could go through, I have a lot of questions. I still have a few and some comments. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around the ordinance. I have read through it a number of times, but I guess, would you like to read the questions, or you have a presentation?
I think Alexis has a presentation in response to some of your questions.
Okay.
Is that right?
Do you want to go in order? Whatever you prefer. Yeah, come on up.
And then I'd like to address some of the comments and concerns that have been raised as well.
Certainly.
So, Alexis, the floor is yours.
All right. So, Ms. Smith, my first question is, can we guarantee 100% affordable housing provided to Revere residents?
No, 70% is the maximum allowed by state law.
So the question is why?
That's the way the state law is written. You're asking why is the state law
Yeah,
written?
Revere is giving the allowance for space requirements. Revere is giving the parking requirement reduction. Revere is providing the space. Revere is granting everything. Why would we do this for everyone else around us?
I mean, 70% is still the majority of affordable units. I can't.
Preference. It's not a guarantee. It's not even a 70% guarantee. It's a 70% preference.
So the way it works is that the affordable units would be,
Okay.
the resident would be decided based on a lottery, and
Right.
Revere residents would get bumped up
Right.
to the top of the lottery before.
I understand. The last
non-Revere
lottery that
residents.
we had in Revere, no Revere residents got in.
My guess is, based on the way the lottery was written, that would be that there weren't enough, they would go through all the Revere applicants and then.
So again, question number one, I would not be in favor of this at all without 100% Revere guarantee.
That's not permitted by state law.
This is a city ordinance. This is a city ordinance. All right, next.
The city, excuse me, I should say, if the city was, did not want, did not require that the affordable units be counted on the state subsidized housing inventory, then it could do whatever it liked. But if the city would like these units to count on the subsidized housing inventory,
So
then.
it's funny math. Okay. Number two, any specific developers in the region that are interested to come and do this type of development?
I mean,
Can you give me a few?
in Revere specifically?
Well, no, just who would be a
There
good
are-
developer that would come in and want to do townhomes, condominiums?
There are more than 150, or excuse me, exactly 150 municipalities in Massachusetts that have inclusionary zoning, including municipalities like,
Right.
No, Cambridge, development
any-
is happening in all of
But
those municipalities.
Who are these developers?
I cannot give you the names of
Okay.
specific developers.
All right. Any local banks that find deed restrictions as a positive or negative?
I've spoken to, I believe, 2 local banks as part of this process, and probably a total of a dozen, over the course of working on this sort of thing. In general, because this is so widespread, again, it exists in 140 municipalities in Massachusetts. Most lenders are, it's what it is. Most lenders are not averse to this.
So which lender is in favor of this that you can give to me?
I can follow up with you afterwards.
I submitted these over a week ago.
I
Okay. Now, all right, so
can't give you specific names.
Question around affordability, because I need to make sure everyone understands in reading this. I think we've fallen off track in thinking inclusionary zoning creates aggressive affordability for people in this room and in the city. That is absolutely needed, aggressive affordability. And they get this pie in the sky idea that we do this and they're going to all of a sudden have great rents. I'm reading through it. I don't think I'm going to help anyone in this room. I don't think that one person that submitted a letter will get help from this, because by reviewing, a majority of these people will not qualify for the income. So that goes to my next question, is what's the round number to qualify? What income, here's the question, what's the average cost of a 2-bedroom deed-restricted apartment versus a market rate? You should know this off the top of your head.
It depends on the household size.
Okay, so an average household size, what's the average income that they'd be able to have?
The income level, as you can see, ranges from $56,000 for a 1-person household up to $87,000 for a 5-person household.
Okay. So I'm going to be willing to bet that a lot of the people that spoke were in a 5-person household, and $87,000 would then get them what for a rent?
$2,175 a month.
So that's a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom?
That would be for technically up to a 4-bedroom.
Okay. What cities and towns is this most benefiting? There's IZ in 150 communities. You mentioned Boston, Somerville as some of the pioneers in inclusionary zoning.
Yeah, absolutely. Cambridge. Let me see.
3 of the most unaffordable communities to live in the state.
It also.
If not the most unaffordable communities to live in. So you get what I'm saying is that after reviewing it more and more, I want to know who's behind this, because the affordability in Revere should be, you saw my other question having to do with the map. We have a Revere Housing Authority that is not densely populated. They're all single level, if not some multi-level townhomes. Why don't we take the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and put more deep affordable units in the Revere Housing Authority and focus energy on that? We have a Affordable Housing Trust Fund that we haven't done anything with since it was inception.
I acknowledge that point. We
Right.
have not done anything yet, and I know that there are plans to get that launched and to put together the plan for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That
Right.
is,
So
that
to me-
should get started. But that doesn't mean that the ideas around the Housing Authority are good ones. We should definitely be looking at that. We need to build that relationship and figure out how the planning department, the mayor's office, and all of the people who are a part of the Housing Authority can use that power to build. Unfortunately, one of the issues is the best way to build affordable housing right now in the United States is through tax credits. Tax credits often take 4 years to wait for from the state and require federal subsidies basically to pay for those, because we're not building
Right.
public housing anymore. We're building affordable housing, and that is one of the issues. And one of the reasons that this is a benefit, and I say this to all your colleagues, Revere has all of the benefits of the beach, of the location, 10 minutes to downtown Boston, the airport, access to the North Shore. And at some point, we want to figure out how we can leverage the money that developers are making here in Revere to build those affordable units. And so if we could show the slide that Alexis put on here, just one
Sure,
second.
sure. Show the slide.
Can we show
But
the
what I
slide?
want to say,
This is the location of all of the inclusionary zoning policies, not
Right.
just Cambridge and Somerville and Boston, but also Chelsea and Everett. They're working on it in Lynn. We could see, all of these communities have inclusionary zoning that is having an impact on building permanently affordable units across Massachusetts.
after reviewing it, I felt that it would actually take the affordability of Revere, that, again, people spoke in favor of, they came here because we are affordable. Are we deeply affordable? No. There's not enough deeply affordable housing in the state. There's not, it is because, for the most part, is people want to live closer to Boston. We already know that. We already know why, that you can go, 50 minutes away from Boston and spend a lot less. We already understand that premise. Revere has done, this is what I just want to make sure everyone doesn't paint this broad picture that we're the evil city council, that the NIMBYs that aren't going to want to have good, responsible development in our city. We've done a really good job, yourself included and the administration included, has done a really good job of making Revere a really great place to live, a really great place to raise a family, and a really great place to build or to spend a lifetime. We have to do a better job of deep affordability. I think I'm not going to use specifics, but there was people that were speaking that were, if I asked them point blank what their rent was in a market rate, or not a market rate, in a private development, they're paying less than what they would get at a government or a state subsidized affordable unit, i.e., what's the current rate that they get at the One Beach? What's the current rate that they get at the Cove site for a 2-bedroom? What's the average rate at the Cove site? Does anyone know?
I don't know off the top of
For a
my head, but I know
two-bedroom.
that most affordable housing developments built by affordable housing nonprofits are in the 50
Right.
to 60% AMI, because the deeply affordable, the
Yeah.
30%, that requires vouchers, that requires public housing,
And we,
Section 8.
and again,
those are
that's the next big crux is Revere has a high percentage of its population that is getting voucher assistance. So we don't factor that into the affordability.
We do.
Well, it's not factored into the 10%. It's not. That's not. The 10% is on the housing stock.
Okay.
Again, and I'll go back to Bob O'Brien, just within the last 2 years testifying that he felt that we were above the 10%, just the calculation. I don't want to put him on the spot. And the last piece, I mean, it doesn't look like the council is going to be really much in favor, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but, the biggest fear for me is taking Revere off the track that it's on, and it's a very positive track. I would like to take a look at this. Honestly, I'd like to scrap it and build it back up and build it better. But also do it so that it actually impacts people, and it's not just pie in the sky verbiage. Because I talk to people in private, they think that they're going to go get a $1,200 apartment tomorrow. It is not happening with IZ. It is not happening.
Right.
No one is getting a $1,400 a month apartment. But I can tell you where you can get a $1,400 a month apartment, one of those ADUs that we just passed. Okay, those exist, and those will exist. I know this personally. We got a letter from a developer, condominium developer, correct, Councilor Visconti?
Correct.
Build
Yes.
housing stock, build actual tenable, long-term controlled costs for a resident, because if you buy a house, you have somewhat of a control. No one's going to come and raise your rent the next day. We can increase our bought housing stock. The developer said, as written, if we pass this today without changing verbiage, they're out. And I can tell you that there's 3 more right behind them, because they can't do it. So the only ones that can do it are the ones that, honestly, they probably funded this whole MAPC. They're in the funding cycle of, honestly, Boston, Chelsea.
Okay, you're throwing a lot of accusations out there.
Well, I can tell you that there's a huge correlation between funding sources. There's a huge correlation between funding sources and who's behind inclusionary zoning. There's a huge
I
correlation.
don't know why you think that there's someone behind inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning is an idea that has been very popular in a lot of communities because it has worked, because it has actually housed people. It has housed thousands of people.
We'll agree to disagree. Boston's a great example.
But we actually have it.
Boston's a great example. This is Boston, who talks about not wanting to gentrify. All the people from One Beach came from Boston. Boston has done the worst job of housing development. Boston has done the worst job at non-gentrification. They are the epitome of it, okay? Look at the Seaport. They had IZ when they developed that,
Yeah.
right? So how did they do with IZ? They worked around it. They worked around it.
They didn't work around it. They built affordable units.
Yeah.
Point of privilege.
Hey, go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you, and sorry, Ricky, you didn't pass on my information, but, I was a big proponent of inclusionary zoning in 2018, and the place was quiet. Why? Same thing in 2016 and 17. Why? Because large developers can absorb it. Mid-level developers, 40 units and below, cannot absorb
But
it.
we actually have financial data that we can show you.
Well, show me 5 developers that are going to come to this city and do it, Ruben. Talk is cheap. Get them up here
Okay.
and have them develop.
Counselor Rotundo,
No, I this
think
is
you
a
make a
point
good,
that puts
I think you make
movement.
a good point, and I do understand that the cost of development right now over the last year because of the
Mr.
soaring
President, with
cost.
all due, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, the issue of immaterialization of units based upon acquiring property in the city of Revere from then to now is the difference between, back then, an acre of land was between $1 million to $1.5 million, depending on where you were, upwards of $5 million now.
Agreed.
Comparative market analysis will tell you this. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. But where was the drive for this when Overlook was there? When I asked for it back then under the Ambasino administration? Where was it when I asked for it when HYM came in? Matter of fact, I have the tape that I actually saved for that meeting, and I was told, we'll talk privately about that. And I said, no, we're here for a public meeting.
You're right. And Counselor,
So-
I'll tell you why. it
If you're
didn't-
mad at me, I wasn't a part of those conversations.
Ruben, me and you
I was
agree on
gonna say.
inclusionary zonings. It's about finding
Yeah.
finding the middle. Where can we get people to come in and do it? Because I'm telling you, I've talked to at least 7 different developers from all different scales. Yeah, that's right. And I'm being told that they won't come here and develop when you've got that ratio, 1 to 6.
And I can tell you that the ordinance that has been developed here, that has been developed thoughtfully by MAPC, hold on, just let me finish my thought, please. Please let me finish my thought. That has been developed thoughtfully as part of this process, is in many ways less aggressive than Chelsea's ordinance. And when I spoke to the housing director for the city of Chelsea, he says that there has been no impact on development in Chelsea. There are a couple of developers that won't develop in Chelsea, but there are always lines of developers that love to go in there. And Chelsea doesn't have half of the benefits that we have here in Revere in terms of the T, the beach, access to the airport, access to North Shore. We have a lot of things going on here, and and Chelsea housing director says it has been a benefit for them. And I don't know why it would be a benefit for Chelsea, but not for Revere.
But with all due respect, they have the ability to offset a lot of those costs because of the fact that they have a commercial heavy versus a non-commercial heavy tax base in the city of Chelsea versus Revere.
I'm not sure why that matters.
Because at the end of the day, someone has to absorb it. The developer is the taxpayer. So who's going to absorb it? Because right now, Garrett Street is on hold, right? The one between Revere and Chelsea, that's on hold. I'm telling you, because I know
Okay,
for
I
a
don't know.
fact. So that's one of those, projects that are supposed to be for affordable development. That's done by, I believe, neighborhood developers. But whoever it's by, they're on hold. The question is why. And every person I speak to, it's either the tax burden's too heavy, they can't amortize because of the land. So if we're going to do something, okay, let's give them a TIF. And more importantly, under the fair housing law, you can't say that people from Revere are going to go into the property. That was the issue that we had before.
You can.
Right.
The HCD has made it very
So-
clear that you can apply.
You cannot circumvent federal law.
He just said you can't. He agreed.
You can,
He
you
agreed.
can look at the QAP on DHCD's website, and it says very clearly, local preference can be negotiated for individual projects, and it can be, and it is part of what we're doing here. One of the issues that we're trying to resolve with inclusionary zoning is codifying the 70% local preference for all units, rather than having to negotiate with the developer in each instance.
And I want to make this perfectly clear. I agree with you on inclusionary zoning. I just don't know how to get to the same path, to the same place as you are, because you've done phenomenal work, and I'm not banging you on this.
Well, then let's
And that's the
work
truth.
together. Then let's
I
work
respect
together to
exactly
improve
what
it.
you've done.
Rather than kill it, let's work together to improve it. If you have ways that you want to
I
improve it.
want to work with you on it because I believe strongly in it, because unfortunately, I have friends and family that are actually needing this. In fact, my ex-mother-in-law, who applied for the property down on One Beach, had all the criteria. Everybody else was from either Chelsea or Boston.
I cannot speak to why the
course you
TND
can't.
process did not have the 70% local preference. I don't know why that
Right.
happened, and so that's a different thing. For right now,
Counselor.
I can tell you that DHCD does clearly state the 70% local preference.
Why don't we
is
start the overlay district over at HYM first before we go and see how it works out
Well, we're not-
outside of
we-
the other part of the city?
We can't do anything with existing properties that are
Yeah.
already in the permitting
All right.
process, or we.
Counselor Rotundo,
Okay.
welcome to the meeting. Thank you for
I told
showing
you I was
up.
gonna be late,
You're
but-
handsome. Thank you for being here.
Can I?
Listen, hold on, just hang on, let me,
That's
can I be the zoning chair for a second? Thank you. Thank you. Listen, I just want to say it again. I want Revere to do something special. I don't want to do this, I feel like Tony Zambuto up here, this feel-good motion. It's a feel-good ordinance. It just, no one can, I don't know if you, I read through it, you know that I was not ducking and talking. I talked to everyone involved. I think it's a feel-good motion. I don't think it's going to really help the residents of Revere. I would rather put our energy and effort into something that will actually help the residents of Revere, using the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, using community improvement money, putting stipulations into building. The city of Revere, this honorable body just approved the first condominium project in the city to offer 10% affordable condominiums. That was through that. We didn't need an ordinance change. We didn't need to do any of this fancy work. We did it right here with our hard work internally. We can do that with every special project that comes in for any zoning relief or any special permit, as is right now. We can make them offer affordability if we feel it is necessary. We can make them pay more towards the community trust fund. We can do all these things without this ordinance that takes all of the control out of our hands, takes all of the control out of the neighborhood's hands, and then just puts it into a couple select developers that, quite frankly, probably get a lot of federal funding and tell us that they're nonprofits, but let's be real. Everyone's making money, and they're making money just 3 different ways. And that's just, no one's going to convince me otherwise. So ultimately, we can go back and forth. The entire subcommittee has already suggested that they're not in favor of this. I have way too many holes to suggest even reworking it as it is. I would be more in favor of bringing it, voting on it tonight, and then bringing back a new draft that maybe works.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree. I would like this voted out tonight, and have them go back to the drawing board, and if they would like to go back, bring something that is more amicable to everyone, to our community. So I'm in favor of having this voted out this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make one last comment, and I agree with every single point that you've made. I agree with Council President Visconti's request to pull it out of committee and vote on it. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about we can take an individual project if we think it makes sense. You want to tell them, hey, look, we'll approve this project if you agree to 12% affordable housing rates. But we don't have to give them 50% off on their lot size. We don't need to give 25% off, on their side yard, so they're encroaching on their neighbors. We don't need to be doing that. So you hit the nail on the head with that, and I think that's what we should do. We should vote this out. I say, I think we've all made our points clear, and then we just take it from there as a council. Thank you, Mr.
One last one, Councilor Rotendo.
First, I have to remember, and I do apologize, I was speaking in front of a bunch of people today, so my outdoor voice was in action here. So sorry for being so very loud. That said, I want to keep it in committee. I would rather work with you all and see if we can come to a happy medium. I disagree with the numbers.
Good thing you're not in this committee.
That's fine. I got my say. I mean, but at the end of the day, I think that could be considered spot zoning, what we're thinking of doing, and that comes to rise. And perhaps there's a way of making a mechanism where we can legitimize the process, in which we, the council, has the final say over how much, what percentage, and where, based upon project size, scale, and development, and work there. But to throw the bathwater out with the baby is not the right thing, because when we have a 2,000 unit developer that comes down to Wonderland and is doing a mixed-use development, we're now out of the box for that developer. But for the guy that's doing 50 units at a time, you've just crushed their ability to build here.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, point of information, just what, I promise, final point. This would not be, and with all due deference to my colleague to my left, it's not spot zoning to put conditions on any development. We're not talking about changing the zoning for a specific project. So
correct.
I just want to clarify that. That was not my intent, was to spot zone.
Understood. No, I agree, and I know what you meant. All right,
Yeah.
Mr. Cantor.
If I may just respond to some of the things that came up before. I'm under no illusions about where this is going, but I think it's important to put on the record a couple of things. So first of all, the issue, and some of these, Alexis may be more of an expert than me, and she might jump in. Please jump in if I say something wrong. The area median income for the greater Greater Boston area. Greater Boston area is actually a vast area. It includes, unfortunately, areas like Wellesley all the way up to New Hampshire. This is a HUD-defined area. That is why it's set at $120,000. There was no time at which it was stated that the city of Boston's area median income was $78,000. It was $120,000. This is a HUD-defined region that we are under some obligation when we set the 60% AMI. That's how we set it, based on a HUD number. The issue around parking, I just wanted to raise because my understanding, and I spoke a little bit with the parking director today, is that for buildings over, I believe it's 6 units, that have had these variances that have been passed up to now, he is under the discretion to determine whether the units qualify for parking. If there is no parking available, if there are more resident parking stickers in the neighborhood than spaces, he won't approve any parking stickers for residents who live in those buildings. That is something that he is ensuring that we don't have overcrowded parking. So in this case, this would actually, under inclusionary zoning for lots of a certain size, he would continue that practice of taking a look and not approving residential stickers that would not crowd the parking within those neighborhoods. So I just think that's important to put that on the record.
I can appreciate, just want to, on that one point.
Sure.
That is 100% discretionary, and there's zero guarantee that he couldn't change his mind. He's not, he couldn't,
Right.
that person, that position, he could be gone tomorrow.
Well, and I think
so
that-
we're using a department head as a factor.
I grant
That's
you
not-
that, but I think that
I wouldn't want to go with that.
Well, the discretionary issue is the issue with
Right.
going project by project,
Yeah.
too. You
Well,
never know who you're going to have in what seat that may or may not want inclusionary zoning for a future project. That's why you codify it.
I understand.
And ensure that you have something in place and not make, because part of the issue with, for development is the time it takes to make those negotiations. It can take years to have negotiations. That costs a lot of money, especially if you don't know, if you're trying to purchase a property and don't know where that's going. So, those are some of the issues that we're trying to rectify with codifying these kinds of laws. And I think the only other thing I wanted to mention is the setbacks. Now, my understanding, if you could talk, maybe Alexis can talk more about zoning because she's more of an expert than I am, but my understanding is that those setbacks would only be for specific zone. It wouldn't be for every single neighborhood. They're only specific zones. I believe it's is it the RB?
It's from Thank you. It would be whatever setbacks are allowed in that underlying district. And those are based on what has been on where variances have been sought and approved. And again, the purpose of that is to, one of the biggest anathema to developers is risk, and having to go through a variance process increases risk. So the idea is to reduce risk and make the process more predictable, so that developers, A, know what they're going to be able to get, and B, know what is going to be required of them in terms of affordability.
Thank you.
But since this is for developments of 6 or more, and certainly we can negotiate whether it should be 6, but in the 6 or more question, there are very few zone neighborhoods in Revere right now that are allowed to have 6 or more. So this doesn't impact the vast majority of the city.
Understood.
Okay.
I know where you're coming from there, from the zoning. Correct. And you are correct in some of that. Thank you. At this point, I think that we should vote on this tonight, as is. Madam Clerk. Recommendations is to vote. Roll call.
For the inclusionary zoning ordinance, to offer a favorable recommendation, Councilor McKenna.
No.
No. Councilor Novoselsky.
No.
No. Councilor Sereno.
No.
No. Council President Visconti.
No.
No. And Councilor Keefe.
No.
No. The ordinance received an unfavorable recommendation and will be forwarded to the full city council this evening for a vote.
That adjourns our zoning subcommittee meeting. Regular meeting will be scheduled at 6 o'clock. Thank you.